From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to episode 335. I'm Brad Robinson. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Anthony Verdino, and he's coming out with a new book, which I really like. It's a pocket-sized manual for your tool belt in this recovery journey on strategies and techniques to overcome the addiction cycle, the ruminating, catastrophizing, and what we need to do in our life, the things around us that we need to alter and change in order to overcome despair, fear, anxiety. We're going to dive into that. His book is called CBT Simplified. Very, very good book. And its subheading is A Simple Guide to Understanding Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. He's a cognitive behavioral therapist, so he has a lot of useful things to say, including the positive self-talk that we need in order to counteract really terrible thinking, the acceptance that we need to adopt in order to start this change process, how to restructure your thoughts and lifestyle changes that we need to implement in order to get to a better place, to clear the clutter of the mind. The mind is a mess. I said this in the previous podcast. Our minds are a mess at some point in our lives, and it just doesn't seem like we can get a grip over it. So in this podcast, in picking up his book, you'll unravel and you will attain just the basics to what we need to do in order to relax and be free of the tyrannical forces within us that's driving the anxiety, the limitations, and it's going to help you open up your life, make you more mindful and proud of who you are. So we're going to talk about a lot in this episode, and I love cognitive behavioral therapy because it's something I did when I was starting out my journey, just to be better and to improve my life because it was a mess, and I talked to him about that. So yeah, hop on board. This is a good one.
And we're live.
Yeah, we're live, man. We're live. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm excited to talk to you. Cognitive behavioral therapy, right up my alley. I actually started doing this at the beginning when I was suffering from an anxiety disorder. I was distraught, completely confused. I was looking for a structure, but not really cognizant of that. I was just like, I need to know a plan forward to get out of this chaos. But I guess before we dive into the specifics of CBT and what you do, can you just give everyone a brief background of who you are, what it is that you do?
Sure, yeah. I'm Anthony Verdino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I work full-time in an outpatient psychiatric setting as a therapist. I also have my own private practice, and I recently put out a book simplifying CBT. And I've been in the field for about a decade providing psychotherapy. And of course, my background is as a social worker.
Right on. How did you get into CBT? I guess when you were studying for your degree?
Actually, it's kind of weird because I don't know if it's me finding CBT or CBT finding me, if that makes sense. I sort of had a style of doing things. It sort of just made sense that the way we think and the way we behave, is connected to how we're going to feel, right? That cognitive triangle. It wasn't until after, in school, they would talk about modalities. Of course, I would listen, but in my mind, I feel like I had it figured out to an extent. one day I was talking to a colleague. I was on an ACT team, assertive community treatment, in Coney Island Hospital. And I was talking to a colleague and I said, this is my style. Let me just break it down to you. Maybe you can tell me like what modality I fall into. And she actually pointed out to me, she said, oh, that's CBT, and strengths-based and supportive, of course, wrapped in there. So yeah, it kind of clicked with me before I even learned what CBT truly was, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What was it about CBT that you found to be particularly fascinating for
Mm.
you, and why did it click, and why did you end up going down that road?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that really it's just the logic.
Mm.
I think with CBT, you don't really have to be this wise person, this grand therapist, it's just logical. It just makes sense, right? It's like
Yeah.
I say a very simple thing. I can't say this to all my patients and clients, but you build a certain rapport, and you could say this, sort of like if you act depressed, and if you think about negative things, I mean, yeah, you're gonna feel sad. You're gonna feel depressed, So it's like 2 + 2 = 4 with
Mm.
CBT. But the thing is, it's classic CBT is complicated. It's a lot of work. It's worksheets. It's a lot of monitoring.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's definitely helpful for a lot of people. But at the same time, it can be as simple as monitoring your thoughts, monitoring your actions, and kind of in therapy, I think it shines the most because that's really what comes out. Anything we talk about, eventually you can equate back to, well, let's look at how you're thinking about that. Let's look at how you're acting, as a result of how you're feeling. It just falls into place. And of course, there's other modalities that say a lot of similar things. For one, like DBT, you know, but for whatever reason, I guess because of those basics, I think any modality can stem from CBT.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Can you break down CBT for anyone listening who doesn't know exactly what it entails?
Sure, sure. Oh, I'd be happy to. I get excited about this kind of stuff.
Good.
So yeah, when you think about CBT, just think about a triangle, right? And each point of that triangle has a word:
Mm.
feelings, thoughts, actions. All three are interconnected,
Mm.
right, within the environment. So that's the circle around the triangle. That includes your body, that includes your home, that includes your friends, that includes social life, right?
Mm.
The environment, your body, has an influence on the triad, right? The feelings, the thoughts, the actions, of course. But ultimately, if we control the thoughts and if we control the behaviors or the actions, right, we can control the way we feel. That's the logic behind it, right? So um, it's really as straightforward as that, right? Um, CBT is a matter of monitoring how you're thinking and how you're behaving, and um, yeah, I think that I don't even want to say too much more about it because then it's gonna, there's other things that we can say. How do you control the thoughts? How do you control the actions? That really starts getting into CBT.
Mm.
So, for example, you've mentioned before, and I know you are a CBT coach, you've mentioned reframing, right? So, cognitive restructuring, challenging negative thoughts when you notice that they're popping up. Same thing with actions. We have behavioral activation. That's what CBT talks about. To make it simple, it's doing what's meaningful to you, what you enjoy, what you love, right? As long as it's something that's not toxic, right?
Mm.
Something that's not giving you that dopamine dump, like doom scrolling or TV,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so it's focusing on that, right? Despite the body, despite the environment, right? Despite the way you feel, it's what do we have control over? And it is our cognition and it is what we do on a day-to-day basis. Targeting the actions, targeting the thinking, controlling those two things so we can feel how we want to feel.
Absolutely. So if one is feeling anxious, there's the thoughts that contribute to it, as well as what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. This was insanely huge for me.
Mm,
I needed a structure, and I didn't know that until coming across a coach like yourself
mm,
who is CBT certified, NLP certified. And it was a game changer because I needed to figure out a way out of the constant rumination, the
mm,
catastrophic thinking,
mm,
and what I needed to do. Literally, I needed someone to give me a blueprint of
mm.
how to move forward. So, talk to me a little about the negative thinking and the catastrophic thoughts, because everyone on my channel, everyone commenting and that I speak to via one-on-one,
Mm,
it's the negative thinking that's
mm.
driving them crazy. And in your book, you
Yeah.
talk about the ABC model, which is
Uh-huh.
great, acceptance, the
Mm,
positive self-talk, the
mm.
distortions. So talk to me a little bit about the negative thinking. How can we get out of that?
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I know I'm saying this again. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this. You
Me too.
mentioned like when in the beginning for you and at some point in your journey, you needed that structure, right? You're using that word structure a lot, and you had this sort of professional that you were speaking to, and I think well, first and foremost, I'll say this, right? Before we even get into the negative thinking, I think the term self-monitoring has to pop up. Now it's funny because like in the book, the first thing I talk about is that cognitive triangle,
Mhm.
and then I talk about self-monitoring, and both of those are under the section of basics. It's so important that we understand these two things first before we look at the rest, right? Self-monitoring is exactly as it sounds, right? Again, keeping it simple. It's monitoring yourself, giving yourself a sense of structure. But how do we do that? Well, we have to understand who we are. Half of why therapy, of course, I don't know the exact fraction, it's impossible to put a number on it, but let's just say half of why I believe therapy is so effective is it encourages self-monitoring, right?
Mhm.
You can think of about maybe like 50 to 100 things in, let's say, a minute, right? And process absolutely none of it, right? So I like to say this little example, like in your mind, pigs can fly, right? Now, of course, a pig cannot fly. A pig can't grow wings and start soaring through the sky, but we can imagine one flying, right? So you can kind of see how wild our thoughts can get. But when you're discussing, when you're processing, even though we could think about 50 to 100 things in a minute and process none of it, when you're discussing, when you're writing, when you're speaking out loud, you're forced to process the words that are coming out of your mouth, the words that you're writing down, right? And that gives birth to the beauty of self-monitoring, right?
Mhm.
So that starts the structure, right? Um, so going further, you mentioned rumination, right? And with rumination, with mind wandering, they go back to the same place, negativity, right? If you ruminate too long, think about the same thing over and over and over again. If you
Yeah.
let your mind wander too long, you go back to this negative place. Humans tend to be negatively biased,
Yep.
right? And we know that. Think about it like this, right? Um, a squirrel. You approach a squirrel. Now, just an animal in the animal kingdom. What is it going to do if you get too close? It's going to run, right? Don't touch
Mhm.
me. This guy's going to hurt me, right? And most animals are like that, right? They'll run away.
Yep.
Everything's trying to get you. We're no different from these animals. We are animals in the animal kingdom,
Mhm.
correct?
Oh yeah.
So we have this fight or flight response. And that's why I believe that through rumination, through mind wandering, we keep going back to negative places, right? So it's not about being broken. It's not about, hey, you're just a pessimist or you're a negative person. It's, hey, I'm a human. I'm an animal in the animal kingdom, right? And that's something that's important to understand too, right? So we
Absolutely.
have to accept that. And you mentioned acceptance as well, right? That's like the reason why under thinking, I put acceptance first. We look at that. Um, then you mentioned the catastrophizing, right? So like expecting the worst, or like a simple example is if you ever had blood work from a doctor and they give you a call, you miss it, and it's a voicemail says, "Hey, let's go over your blood work." Oh man, my cholesterol high. That's it. Is he going to tell me that I need to cut out this and cut out that, or even worse, get on the phone and the doctor's like, yeah, just take it easy on the fast food. You know what I mean? This is just a little elevated, but you're good. You don't need no meds, right? But we spend all that time, thinking about it, catastrophizing, especially if, we're ruminating and we're really kind of going in a circle, right? Um, Catastrophizing falls into this category of cognitive distortions, as again, you mentioned from the book, which we all have, right? Again, humans, part of the animal kingdom. I'm sure at some point you probably held the door open for somebody, right? And they didn't say thank you. And for a second, we're like, oh, is there something wrong with me?
Oh,
Am
yeah.
I no good, right? Like, no, that's just jumping to conclusions here. It's another distortion, right? Or look at the political system, right? I'm of course in America you got the Republicans, you got Democrats, and they're pointing fingers at each other, not realizing how much of our views actually overlap, right? Another distortion, black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, polarized thinking, right? I say in a black and white world, no, we're in a gray world. There's a lot of colors in between here, So cognitive distortions are, again, part of being human, right? False, inaccurate thoughts, perceptions, beliefs, right? It's not about not having cognitive distortions. It's not about not having negative thinking. It's about self-monitoring, right? Having that structure to say, wait a second, hold on. Am I thinking negatively right now? Am I thinking in a distorted way right now? Like catastrophizing. And then actively challenging that thought. Cognitive restructuring, or the term you use, right? Reframing, right? That is how we essentially control the thinking, in this case, that negative thinking. The one more thing I want to just throw in before the last part is that ABC model, is that positive self-talk, right? Now, if we have negative thinking, right, we're more likely to not engaging in negative self-talk, right? Beating ourselves up mentally. In the book, because I put images for each section, as you've seen, for negative self-talk, or should I say for positive self-talk, the image is grease down a drain, right? The negative self-talk is like pouring grease down your drain. Eventually, it's going to stick to your pipes, right? In this case, that grease that's sticking is the negative feelings, the negative thinking, right? Just from talking to ourselves and thinking in a negative way, right? And the positive self-talk is like, I can't say Drano because I know it's not good for our drains, but like peroxide and white vinegar or something. That's positive self-talk. That'll help get that gunk off your pipes and push out all the negative self-talk, all the grease, right? Making you feel lighter, making you feel clearer. And that's also part of reframing and cognitive restructuring, right? It all comes back to controlling that thinking and stopping that rumination. And the ABC model is really saying all the same stuff, right? Action, an activating event, something happens, right? Something simple, like we stub our toe, right? B is the belief about that event, right? Like, oh man, I stubbed my toe, I'm in pain. Like, what's wrong with me? Here's a negative self-talk. I should pay attention more, like, I don't know why I make these mistakes like that, right?
Yep.
And then the consequence, the C, is, well, we feel like crap. We don't feel good about ourselves. Now rewind for a second. Activating event, right? You stub your toe. Belief comes in, the first thing probably will come in is, ow, that hurts. Like what am I thinking? Why not watch out? But you know what? These things happen. I'm a human, right? People stub their toe all the time. The consequence is, well, we don't feel as bad about ourselves,
Yep.
And of course, that's a very simple example, but I'm sure you could see how that, translates to a lot bigger things.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love that. You explained it perfectly. It's something I learned in NLP to help someone unravel the underlying issue, because sometimes when someone comes home from work, and they snap and they lose control. Why is the dishes there? I told you 100 times that and you're like, whoa. It's like, I'm sorry. But that's not the issue. The dishes isn't the issue. Maybe the boss came around to your desk, said a little comment that planted a seed of you doubting your even position at the job. And then you didn't deal with that, and it kind of stuck and it's ruminating.
Mm,
And there's these levels, right? Because sometimes when somebody comes in with a problem, there's all these other problems
mm,
ar- uh, at the bottom of it, like
right.
they've stacked up for a long time. And the great spiritual teacher Michael Singer says, we don't realize how many of these stacked problems we walk around with. And his, like, to go back to your techniques
Mm,
around letting go, accepting and letting
mm,
go of this negative self-talk, is he says, when something comes up, give yourself a mantra, relax. His is
mm.
relax, relax. So when something happens, relax. And then you kind of feel like the shudder, this letting go, it kind of, if it's a feeling of it passing through, and then
Mm.
something else will come up, like another problem, another dislike. And then he says, do the same
Inevitably.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Do the same thing. And then you keep doing it and you realize you feel a little bit lighter. You feel a little bit lighter. We don't realize how much these stick right inside of
Yeah.
us. We
It's like
walk
riding a
around.
bike.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. The negative, the same way that doing the positive mantras
yep,
can do the same thing. Well, that positivity sticks as well. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. The positivity sticks. It actually becomes a habit, right? The looking on the other side of the coin. We walk around, like you were saying, in a certain frame,
Hmm.
and then, well, there's another side to this frame. It's like the Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
It's like you have a certain set of beliefs, and you're like, screw the other guy, but the other guy has a point and you have a point. So that's a thing, though. Like you said, there's so much overlap, and
Right.
it's important to, well, if you have your point, make sure that you know the other man's point too, because
Right.
when they bring up their point, are you going to have enough reasoning to overcome that point or accept that they have a point?
Right.
So that's you know, being rational and
Hmm.
in
Looking
humility
at
as
being
well.
objective, looking at the whole picture as well.
Oh yeah.
Especially as subjective creatures, like you can't blame us for being subjective, but
Oh yeah.
it doesn't take much to actually just take a step back and just imagine it play out like you're watching a show,
Yeah.
right? Like the Brad show, right? Like take a second. If you're watching a TV show, you ever see somebody go through a hard day, even the villain, their past story, and you kind of empathize with them for a little bit, even
Oh
though
yeah.
they're no good, but
Oh
they
yeah.
showed their backstory for a second. When you're watching something, it's objective, right? Why not do that with our own selves? So that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what makes a great villain, is the villain, you can empathize with that
Yeah.
person. Because
Good
like
point.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn said in his writing, he said the line between good and evil runs between every human heart. Right? Like, Harry Potter, there's the evil lurking within him that he's
Yeah.
contending with.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing how we see someone like Severus Snape, who was
Hmm.
evil. Like, this hatred we have for this character. But at the end of the story, we realize that he was doing a lot of good throughout the books. And
Right.
we're like, oh my
Right.
God, I didn't realize, he was, a good person, even though on the surface, it's just, yeah,
He
it's,
could have still been a little bit nicer to Harry. I have but no, but you're absolutely right.
oh yeah, he was mean. There's no doubt about that.
But even that, like he had his motives for doing that too.
Right, right. Yeah,
He knew Harry needed to be tough. You got to go against Voldemort, man.
yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about actions. A
Mm,
huge thing for me. When I was going through my anxiety recovery, I
mm,
decided to not tell anybody about my goals. This is just a personal thing for me. I
mm.
tell anyone about my goals and what I'm striving towards until I was seeing results, until the action stuck with me. Because I was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go to somebody and be like, yeah, I'm doing this thing, and then I'm gonna not do it, and
Right.
feel even worse about myself. I needed to implement certain habits, behaviors for me in order to prove myself wrong, because I
Mm,
was just running wild, just
mm,
anxious,
mm.
no, not goal oriented. So talk to me about the actions and what one needs to do in order to move forward from their internal chaos.
That's a good thing to talk about here. I just want to say, like, based on what you said, it makes a lot of sense how you needed to sort of start the habit, right? They say it's like 21 days to build a habit, but you wanted to sort of believe in yourself before you let anybody else know, that
Yep.
positive change. It sounds like, especially with anxiety, you didn't want to put too much pressure on yourself as well, because you were already doing that. You had anxiety. You were managing that to begin with. So I just first want to say it makes a lot of sense. They also say that I've read somewhere that it's good to tell somebody that we're making a change. Usually it comes with something like quitting something, right?
Yep.
Like if you're a marijuana smoker or a drinker, you want to put it down, telling your close loved ones, hey, like I stopped, it's only day one, but I stopped. It kind of gives you a realm for what I call it vitamin C, or they call
Yep.
vitamin C care and compassion, not the
Yep.
actual, orange stuff. But yeah, so when it comes to that, so if you're stuck in negative actions, right, more likely than not, it's paired with some form of negative thinking, right? And you might not even realize that it's negative, right? It's like, hey, for example, life is short, so I'm just going to drink. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to drink. But that thought of, hey, life is short is, it could be something positive, but for that person, it could be negative to them. Say, hey, screw it, right? And therefore, they're engaging in that action. Um, I think it's important to not forget the thought part, with that being said. But if we're just focusing on the actions, it goes back to that example. Very simple. If you are acting like an anxious person, right? Not leaving the house, right? Not going to that party or that event because you're afraid of what people might think of you or say, right? Or just you don't like crowds, right? You're more likely than not going to feel that way. You mentioned somebody, I forgot his name. You just mentioned like the mantra, right? Affirmations, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, See, that helps a lot with all of this, and of course, it bleeds into the thinking, right? Um, Before I got on this podcast today, and sometimes before sessions, right, I get nervous, and I'm somebody who speaks in front of people all the time, but I'm that human, so I have to tell myself quite simply, be confident, be confident,
Mm-hmm.
be confident. Simple, right? We have these complex brains, but we don't realize how simplicity really allows us to let it stick. Look at you mentioned Jesus before. Look at Einstein. Look at Muhammad. Look at a lot of the Gandhi. Look at Buddha. Look at these big figures, right? Not just religious ones either. They broke things down into simple terms,
Yep.
right? They made it very simple for the everyday person to comprehend. So we have to do that for ourselves too, especially if we're trying to maintain a structure. Now, I apologize, I keep going back to the thinking when you're asking about actions, but I think it's because they're so deeply rooted together.
Yep.
But when it comes to actions, it really comes down to three words: what's meaningful, pleasurable, enjoyable, right? That's not hurting you, right? That's not impacting you negatively, right? You mentioned self-pleasure before, right? Yeah, that's pleasurable, but doing it is ultimately hurting our mental health. Studies have shown that, pornography and too frequent masturbation and things like that are just not good for us emotionally, right? So you ask yourself, right? And can I do something that's more productive? Can I do something that'll give me a greater sense of purpose? Like even just going for a walk, right? It's good for my body. I get to take in the beautiful world around me, right? Maybe you can encourage a friend to come with you. Um, um, Another thing, for example, would be doom scrolling, or an action like, okay, I have this free time. I had a busy day of work. I'm just going to sit down, get comfortable, and scroll through my phone, right? Or hey, Wednesday just came out, right? Let me just binge watch the show, right? Or even a show that has more episodes. Let me just sit here and binge watch. You're not earning that dopamine,
Yep.
right? It's a dump. That's why afterwards, when you get off Instagram, you feel like crap, right? You feel bad. You didn't earn any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you go to the gym right now, I know that people listening are probably going to say, listen, I'd rather be on my phone than going to the gym. And I don't blame them. But it's just a point, right? Cooking something, talking to a family member on the phone, trying to help somebody, believe it or not, can increase a level of happiness. Harvard did a study. Even having on your calendar a plan to help somebody can increase your level of happiness from whatever metric they use to weigh that, right?
Yep.
So simply said, if you're in a rut with your actions, right, you have to self-monitor and tell yourself, well, what is wrong? Is the action that I'm doing negative for me? Is it not feeding into my sense of purpose, my sense of meaning, right? What I feel like is enjoyable or pleasurable, is that something that I'm really gauging? And when you do, if you notice that it's negative, it's simple as, well, make it positive. Do something else. Do something that will make you feel good. Now, I know it just this stuff sounds so simple the way that I'm saying it, but again, as I said, for these greatest minds in history, I try to make it that way, because how else are we going to remember this in day-to-day life?
Yep.
Viewers right now will be listening to this, right? And if we make it too complicated, it might make sense at first, but then the next day they're going to go home and, they're going to get frustrated because their boss was mean to them. So they're going to take it out on their spouse and they're going to forget the whole thing, right? Because we made it too complicated. But when we make it simple, it's there for us to kind of grab from the toolbox, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit.
No, I like the jumping. I'm that type of guy. Yeah, I think breaking habits is so important. One of the things that helped me break my pornography addiction, if you don't know my story, I talk about this a lot on my channel. I'm almost 7 years clean, no pornography, no masturbation, after 12 years of just, it was a long time. And I think a lot of young men come to my channel, and it's just shocking, because if I had access to a smartphone when I was in high school, it's just game over. It's just, there's a monster in me, but also a monster in everybody that's just ready to latch on to something like pornography, sugar, whatever.
Right.
But I was saying, what helped me was breaking habits. So if what triggers me to watch is being home alone, go to the coffee shop, go to the library, go to the gym, break it.
There it is.
Go for that walk, right? That's huge. There's also one thing I wanted to touch on. You said earlier, being nervous, before a podcast. I always get nervous before a podcast, but I also think that the reason why someone like me or you gets nervous is because this means something. That's the reframing, right? Like, I'm nervous because I care. Like, I want to help. I want to help. I want to be of use. And I think that's true, right? I think that's absolutely true.
I love that, Brad. I love that.
Yeah. See, it's just I when I was younger, I used to avoid going to work because I'd be like, I'm afraid of being a fool, being new at my job and embarrassing myself. So I would avoid calling in to work, because I had a call-in job where I would call in and make myself available, and then I'd get called to go to work. I worked in the film industry for a bit of time.
Okay.
So I would not call in. Yeah. I would do electrical work on film sets. I did camera assisting on film sets, stuff like that. And it would be a call-in kind of job. And I would just, the night before, I'd be like, no, I'm going to take tomorrow off. Feeling nervous, I don't want to go. And then that snowballed, right? It's just, you do that one time, and then that voice inside the next day is going to be like, yeah, you can take another day off. And I was just underlying that was just nerves. I was just afraid of failure, afraid of putting myself out there. And it just, and you talked about this later in your book, beware of avoidance under feelings, right? It's like you avoid these places, the dragon grows, and you shrink, your anxiety grows.
Yeah. that like there's a lot there, right? Even before touching on avoidance, right? Just looking at anxiety, right? Like you mentioned your anxiety, right? And how you take off one day and then it can suddenly turn into another, and then also bleed into other areas of your life, right? There's a part of the book where I say know the difference. I think we overuse, right? In your case, that's anxiety, right? We overuse the word anxiety. There's a difference in my view, from stress and anxiety and sadness from depression, right? Stress and sadness are normal human emotions, right? We need them. Stress is why you look both ways before you cross the street. Anxiety is you not crossing the street. Sadness allows us to know what we like and what we don't like when you think about it. Depression, you're not getting out of bed kind of idea, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. When you feed your stress too much, right, and you feed into it too much, now you're developing a condition. Now you're developing anxiety. The key thing to remember, right, difference between stress, anxiety, sadness, depression, right, is anxiety and depression are debilitating. They keep you away from life. They are a problem. We talk about in society, we not to label people, right? Then why do we put these conditions on people? Why do we put these clinical terms on people? Well, we only do it when it's a problem, right? As a therapist, and I can clinically diagnose, I would not diagnose a friend or a family member if there wasn't a problem there. And even still, I wouldn't diagnose them because that's for their own professional to do. But it's the same logic, right? So with that, the other part you mentioned, like the beware of avoidance. Avoidance in general is that, right? Why are we avoiding something? Well, for whatever reason. But the more important thing is it's debilitating us. It's keeping us away. Now, avoidance is not an evil thing either. I say it in the book. Maybe you don't want to go down a dark alleyway. Maybe you should avoid that. It's probably a better thing than not. But we don't want to avoid our feelings. We don't want to avoid considering our actions or even the way we're thinking about something if it's negative. You mentioned in one of your podcasts, and you mentioned it just now, that dragon, the kid's book, there's no such thing as a dragon, right?
Yep.
And you mentioned it just now as the monster, that monster. And I have little notes here I wanted to read off of. That made me think of acceptance. So when you think of avoidance being this bad thing, we got to think of, all right, what's the positive part of it, or what's the remedy, I should say? Well, that's acceptance, which I purposely, like I said before, put in the first part of the thoughts section of my book. How to manage our thoughts for the better. Well, first thing we do is we accept them, right? So if you drop a pen on the floor and you don't accept that you dropped your pen on the floor, how are you going to lean down and pick up your pen, right? Got to accept that you're thinking this way and expect that you're feeling negative, for instance. And if we can't do that first, then how are we going to adjust our thinking thereafter? So that's how we manage the dragon. We accept that the dragon is there. I use a simple example of that pen being on the floor, right? And then I think of another thing, the yin yang symbol, right? And I put that as the image for acceptance, right? The yin yang symbol, in a traditional sense, it's derives from Asia. It's chaos versus order. It's not necessarily negativity versus positivity, but for the sake of simplicity, look at it that way, right? The circle is a continuum. Life, the problems today are the problems of yesterday. We complain about gas prices today. It was hay prices back in the 1700s or whatever, right? It's a continuum. It's gonna always be, right? That negativity, like you mentioned before too. So in that circle, you have two koi fish, right? Dark, light, with a little dot of light and a little dot of dark within each, right? There's always going to be the bad, but we can choose to focus on the positive, right? Versus avoiding the negative, we say that, hey, it's there, it's part of all of this, but I'm going to choose to focus on the positive. When you do that, the negative becomes as significant as a dot of darkness in a field of light, right? Keeping it that simple. But yeah, so after the acceptance part, that takes us out of avoidance. And whenever you're avoiding a problem, I think the simple way to look at it is like just you have a leak, right, in your roof, or you heaven forbid broke a bone. Are you going to put a bucket under your leak in your home? Are you going to just put a Band-Aid over your broken arm and expect that that's going to fix the problem? No. Well, you're really just avoiding the issue because you don't want to deal with it further. That leak is going to become a bigger problem soon. It might be a burst pipe or whatever. And that break obviously is not going to heal properly if you just put a Band-Aid over it, right? So I know, again, jumping around and saying a lot with that. But fortunately, you like jumping around. I think that we have to be mindful of avoidance. We have to accept that there is negativity and accept that it's uncomfortable to address that, while also, you know, yeah, I think it's all there.
No, it's beautifully said. I think you nailed it. The dragon always hoards treasure, and that's what you were talking about with the. There's always something positive, and it's not within the threat, and that's what you're saying is, hey, what you're avoiding, there's knowledge in there that is unmanifested. You got to go towards it, and then you'll gain the treasure, aka the information that'll help move you forward towards just. But is it towards something? Yeah, the spirit of the highest good, or like the confidence that you'll gain, the bravery that you'll attain, or one of the things that stunned me, Anthony, just absolutely stunned me, was if you take one thing that you're really afraid of, so an agoraphobic will be afraid of, say, like tight enclosed spaces where they'll be away from their family and friends to help them, and they'll make a fool out of themselves around other people, and that's like the two ultimate fears that they will face. And you take one of those fears, elevator, they're afraid of the elevator, or flying. You guide them through that desensitization process. They get braver. They go on the plane. They go in the elevator. They overcome it. They get off, and they're like, that was tough, but I did it. They feel a little bit better, confident, braver.
Yeah.
That bleeds out into all other areas of their life. It's not just one thing and then you got to go do another thing. And then it's like you get braver towards life itself. Because, you don't teach people, life is the ultimate predator. And it's like, no, well, you life is tough. Life's challenging. You have to build on your bravery. Like that's the existential conundrum, right? It's like, it's not that, everyone's inherently good and life is, beautiful and
right. It can be perfect, right?
Yeah, exactly. It can be perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's tough. And if you can show yourself that you can manage, it's like good for you,
And it's like what you said, it doesn't take as much as we think it does. It's like, yeah, you can have all of these things, like you mentioned, an agoraphobic, right? You can have all these things that you're afraid of, but just tackling even just one of them. I think about it like, like concrete. If there's a crack in concrete, right? You pour some water in it. I know you're in Canada, right?
Yeah.
You freeze that up, and what's going to happen? It's going to expand. It's going to crack that concrete more, right? You're just handling one crack at a time. And that helps you build that confidence. It's absolutely true. And it connects back to the triangle when you think about it, right? The more you put efforts towards doing positive things in terms of actions, right? The more you're going to feel confident. So you're thinking about it in a more of a positive way. Even if it's just that one thing, the more confident you're going to feel, right? And then the more confident you're going to be to possibly tackle other things that you're afraid of. It's so true, and that's why, like what you said about saying all this, I see how it bridges off of avoidance, right? And not avoiding things. Yeah, life is hard. Life is beautiful, but life is hard. And I think it's supposed to be hard. Otherwise, what would it be worth if it was painless, right? You mentioned a lot on your podcast. I know you mentioned a higher power, often, right? And we can even bring that into this, right? Because an almighty power, let's say God, right? God allows that evil to exist. Like, keep
Yep.
that in mind. God wants to. God goes like this, no more evil.
Yep.
And he can do that, technically, right? Almighty can do that. Why doesn't he? Well, without that bad, that dark, that evil, how the heck would we know who God is? How would we know what light is, right? It's a comparative. Positivity is relative to negativity. It doesn't exist without it,
Yep.
right? So, sometimes we seek easy comfort, right? But that's actually the same thing that keeps you in bed. Isn't it a lot more comfortable for us to say today, hey, we're anxious about getting on. Let's just not get on. Let's not go to work. Let's stay in bed. That's so comfortable,
Oh yeah.
right? But it's destroying us if we do it,
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there. There's a great quote by C.S. Lewis. I'm just
Mm,
gonna pull it up on my phone. I wrote it down yesterday, and
mm,
it just blew me away. He says, "If you seek truth, you will find comfort. If you seek comfort, you will neither find truth or comfort."
mm.
And I was like, yeah, like the truth is, you should get out of bed. It's not like what truth is for me, Anthony, is if I just stay in the bed or if I avoid something, the truth is I'll feel good for a moment. It's like, yes, I decided not to do it. Good.
Mm,
But then
mm,
the voice haunts me for the rest of the day. It says, you could have done it. Have
mm,
done it. It's like,
mm.
shut up, shut up. You could have
There's
gone
the
to the
negative
gym.
self-talk.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. That's why I love, like, David Goggins, for example. He talks about this all the time. He's like, he does the hard stuff in the morning because he knows if he doesn't do it, then that he'll be tortured to death by that voice saying, yeah, the truth hurts, don't it?
Yeah,
Truth hurts.
yeah, yeah.
But I agree, there is a higher power. And I think of the book of Job, where I think Satan is described as the wanderer of the earth, like he wanders the earth.
Mm,
And I love that because it's like a perfect description of the material world, right? Like,
mm.
and Christ talks about how the material world won't satisfy you. Like, if you cling to the material world, you will suffer. And I love how Satan is described as the one who's wandering the earth, right?
Oh yeah, he was cast away or
Yeah,
cast out of the garden, right? You
cast
you
out of the
you want to
garden.
help them so bad? Go ahead, go live with them.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. It's perfect. And I think it's a test, Anthony. I really think it's a test. God tests Job whether he
Mm,
can overcome the insane tragedy he was placed under, with all the, God makes a bet with the devil saying,
mm.
hey, go at my man Job there, and I bet you he'll maintain faith no matter what you throw his way. And like, every bad thing happens to Job.
Right.
But Job believes, like, it's a test. I'm going to maintain faith because there's either go through tragedy
Mm,
and maintain faith,
mm.
or go through tragedy and be bitter and resentful and make it even worse, right? And that's possible. You can go through tragedy and make it way worse because it's a deep pit, or you can go through
Mm.
tragedy and it's bad, but you can do what you can to be stable and
Yeah, and pull
maintain.
the good from it.
Yeah,
It's like look
yeah,
at post-traumatic stress, right? Now there's a term post-traumatic growth, right? Like after that trauma, mentally, right? Goes back to the ABC model. Your beliefs about that trauma and the work that you do with it can be the consequence, right? It doesn't have to be your ending. It could be your strength. I mean, both of us have went through things in our life and we chose to make them our strength, right? And I love that you bring up the book of Job and even like the Bible in general. I think whether people are religious or not, I think there's so much that we can learn from it. If you look at the whole Old Testament, just about, right? Like it's just a story of the chosen people, the Israelites, messing up over and over and over and over again. I mean, even before them. I mean, we're talking about Adam and Eve constantly, and what God keeps doing is forgiving them, right? And it's the story that kind of shows us like, hey, we don't have to be perfect, right? It doesn't mean that we're not going to have difficulties and heartache, right? But take that in stride. It's part of it, like you mentioned with Job being tested. Or if we bring it back to David Goggins, he says one of his internal monologues is that when I get to the gates of heaven, right, I see it like God shows me this big board, right, of everything I've accomplished, right? And I want to be able to look at that, and he looks at that, and we nod at each other. I'm kind of saying it in my own way, but he holds himself to that. He's looking at the challenges that he puts himself through and the challenges of life as part of life, right? He even, this is the funny thing, but he doesn't even listen to music when he's working out because he says, no, it makes it easier. I don't want it easier, right? Now, of course, that's an extreme, right? We're not expected to be that extreme with it, but there's a lot to learn from it. We don't got to be Goggins, but, accepting that life has setbacks and negativity and taking it in stride can actually make life that much more enjoyable.
Absolutely. I agree. I think you've said it beautifully. And it's also like when he says, he doesn't listen to music. I think it's a great thing to take away from, in that we should cut out the noise, because we don't really know who we are until everything goes quiet. And it goes back to the acceptance, the very beginning, when accepting the fact that you're flawed, that you have habits that don't serve you. A lot of the time we don't come to that realization because we are ingrained, like you said, binge watching something on the phone. It's like, cut that out, be quiet, and then maybe you can accept your situation, then move forward.
Well, that's what makes mindfulness so important too, right? Just being able to be, and I think that's, with that being said, if anybody wants to practice cutting out that noise, right, just take some deep breaths. It's definitely a great distressor. I mentioned it as like a golden coping skill, but outside of that, just take some deep breaths, right? And just focus on the world around you. See what you see. They did studies on that, by the way, Brad. They've had people under MRI machines and who practice mindfulness, and just to see what it's about, what it does to the brain. And I believe one study supported that after 8 weeks, and that's a long time, but 8 weeks of practicing mindfulness for something like 30 or 45 minutes a day, it was pretty significant. They found that gray matter increases in multiple areas of the brain, right? I think it was something like 8 different areas. And gray matter is good. We want gray matter in the brain. Why? I don't know. I'm not that knowledgeable about it. But there's 4 areas of the brain. I believe they're the prefrontal cortex, the PCC, the insula, which is responsible for empathy, and I forgot the 4th one, but regardless, these areas have been shown to help us with emotional regulation, like I said, with empathy, right? So it actually increases our ability to take in the world around us, and and that in itself is valuable.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it's just inevitably good. I think it's like the other world people don't really know about, right? It's like you're on your phone all the time, you're busy running, watching, doing this, and then you take a moment to sit, take in the breeze, the trees, or the tea that you're sipping on, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, I feel pretty good. And I think once you become mindful, the problems start to show up, which is right? Like once you're alone sitting there and you finally have a moment to yourself, you're like, oh yeah, that problem. And that's good. That's your unconscious mind offloading, like, hey, you've been ignoring this for too long.
Right. It's true.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
That mind wandering, right? And it goes to these negative places. And that's why it's like, it's not about, not having the negative thoughts or negativity. It's about, let's look at this constructively, It's true. Yeah.
Well, Anthony, I really appreciate your time, man. I could keep talking to you for another hour, but
Same,
I
man.
think we
Same.
have stuff to do. No, it's been fun. You're down the same avenue I am, and that's why I wanted to reach out, and that's why you reached out as well. And I
Yeah,
love that you having a podcast. Like-minded people will come to you and want to join the show, and I love that,
absolutely.
man. I was so excited, but I
Yeah,
really
I'm
appreciate your
excited to be
time.
here. Yeah, no, I appreciate you and thank you for having me as a guest here. It was really a pleasure. Talk about an hour. I could probably go all day with you.
Yeah, man.
And it'd be a pleasure if in the future you ever wanted to have me on again, or even just to chat on the side. This was great.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And let everyone know where they can find you, what's on the horizon, and yeah,
Sure, yeah. You can check me out more on my website at anthonyverdino.com. You could also check out my book, CBT Simplified. It's available on Amazon. You can also just type my name on Amazon, it'll pop up. And for the future, well, we'll see where it brings us. Hopefully, more teaching opportunities. My goal is to help as many people as I can with the time that I have. And I'm going to make sure I do my best to make that happen.
that's beautiful. And you have coaching, right?
Yeah,
You have your clients. Yep.
absolutely. I offer coaching, especially I do individual therapy. It's limited, the space that's available, but I do offer coaching as well as a less intensive thing, and especially for folks that are outside the New York area, because
Mm,
my license kind of keeps me to New York, but it doesn't mean that coaching can't be provided as well.
beautiful. Well,
Yeah,
thank you again.
it's a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me. You're great.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. Make sure to go to unpluganxiety.com and check out my anxiety recovery program. Everything that worked for me, I include in this program, including a releasing trauma exercise, meditations, a journal where you can plan and face the fears that you're not realizing that are hidden within the unconscious mind. Everything that you do in this program is unraveling the unconscious and all of the underlying fears and limiting beliefs that are holding you back from reaching your truer self. Go check that out. What are you waiting for?